want a ticket straight to them pearly gates.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So today we have some incredible news. This is something that we were theorizing and speculating will happen, and it finally happened. It's confirmed now. We don't have to speculate anymore. We know where Nakatsu went. Nakatsu went and joined Harada's new development studio. For those of you who may have forgot or don't remember or don't know, basically what's been going on for the past, I would say, let's go all the way back to the beginning, right? 2024 Tekken 8 released. At that same time, Bandai Namco canceled a bunch of games, and then by the end of that year, we had a leak from an employee saying that Bandai Namco was treating their employees terribly. I'll try to put a screenshot on the screen. You guys can pause and read the details if you missed it. But throughout that same year, Harada began to speak very negatively about Bandai Namco in news articles, on Twitter. Some of those posts he had to delete, probably higher ups told him to do so. What we've seen happen afterwards was of course Season 2 released, and that was one of the worst updates for Tekken in history, basically modern history, right? And then you fast forward a little bit after that, the developers apologize, they commit to making changes, some changes are made, but then the first thing that we notice is the producer, one of the producers of Tekken 8, Shimbroy, leaves the studio. Now that kind of flies under the radar. No one really picks up on it. I made a video on it at the time, but he left, right? That person worked on some of the DOA games, and they kind of had an impact on Tekken 8. But then soon after that, you fast forward about 3 months later, then Harada shocks the globe by announcing that he's leaving Tekken. And we all know the story by now. He didn't want to go, but the passing of his friend and also the way that Bandai Namco is treating everyone, he felt like it was time to go. And he really just went off into the world searching for a job. We've seen him on LinkedIn, adding a bunch of developers as friends. We've seen him basically interacting with a lot of people. He was looking for his way forward. And then surprise, surprise, he eventually finds it. He makes a deal with SNK and also Saudi. So here's the deal, right? Because a lot of people get the details confused. So he is the CEO of his own like studio, his own company, right? But that company is kind of funded by Saudi and SNK, but they do not have any authority over him. They're just giving him the money, the resources, and they're saying, go and do whatever you want. And the reason why Saudi is doing that is because they're not in the business of making money. They're in the business of just making people happy, right? That's their primary plan for right now, right? That's why they're investing in so many different things all over the world. EWC, Mr. Beast theme park, UFC, sports, etc. But he gave Harada his own studio, and from there, Harada was then had the task of building together a team. And then, as some time passed, we were wondering whether or not other developers would join, because usually when a leader of a development studio leaves and then get their own studio, people from that company follow, especially if their bosses, which is Bandai Namco, are treating them poorly. So the first signs of this happening was Nakatsu leaving, right? Nakatsu left, and there was this huge speculation about who was in charge, because Nakatsu is the guy who was supposed to replace the guy, Harada, right? So he was Harada's right-hand man, and if he's leaving, who's in charge? Now, we were scrambling, trying to figure it out. There was one developer who seemed like he would be in control. His name is Nakabayashi. Harada responded to that on Twitter and said Nakabayashi, Mishima Star, and he said some other name. I can't remember. I'll put a screenshot. He basically said that all those guys weren't there anymore. Now, that begs the question of, are those guys joining Harada? But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So Harada basically said with that tweet that all the people we think are in charge are not in charge. And then we started turning to the people who we know for certain are still there, which is Yasuda Esports and Michael Murray. Both of those guys have not said anything leading up to that point, but with all the pressure, they responded and they said, basically, we're not going to tell you who's in charge. And that's kind of like they have to do that, right? With so many people leaving and with so many people moving out, those guys may leave. So they can't really say who's leading, because who knows who left now and then, right? So they said we're not going to tell you who's in charge, and that was basically them defending the company, right? And some time has passed since then, and we now see that Nakatsu is with Harada. He has a tweet here, and he also has a picture. I'll read both of them. So Nakatsu says, a quick update. I've joined VS Studios as a next step in my journey. Working on games again with two of my former bosses feel nostalgic in many ways, while at the same time the excitement of creating something completely new makes every day incredibly fulfilling. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can create together. Now, this is pretty interesting of what he's saying, right? Because first off, we all know Harada, but the other guy in this picture is also someone who's worked a lot on Tekken. I believe the last Tekken they worked on was Tekken 7, but this person is a very skilled developer as well. They haven't said exactly what game they're making, but considering all three of these guys are fighting game developers, I mean, no one's really expecting them to make a Star Wars game or the Call of Duty rival or the GTA killer. They're probably going to make a fighting game, right? But the part there where he's highlighting making something completely new, that is a very interesting thing because a lot of these guys, yes, they are kind of the founders of Tekken, of like modern Tekken, what we perceive to be Tekken. These guys kind of crafted it. But also, all these years later, they are being burdened by it. They can't make changes unless the entire player base will riot. They made changes in 6, small changes, but still players of that generation hated the changes. They made changes in Tag 2. Some players of that generation hated it. Some people actually love it. In Tekken 7, there were some people who say that that's not even real Tekken. Even though it was kind of accepted and people still loved it, you could just see which each iteration where the developers tried to push it in a direction, there were some players who pushed back. And that all came to a breaking point with Tekken 8. But not only Tekken 8, but with Tekken 8 Season 2. That was the full realized version of the game that the developers intended. And it strayed so far from what Tekken was supposed to, or what players wanted Tekken to be. And as a result, it resulted in so much backlash. So these developers now at their new studio, they don't have to deal with any of that. I mean, if you just think about Marvel Tokon, right? Marvel Tokon, only stupid people are looking at that game and saying, this doesn't play like Fighters. This doesn't play like Guilty Gear. This doesn't play like Street Fighter. It's like obvious, bro. It's a totally new IP. It's never existed before if you go backwards, right? So getting away from all of the legacy is something that these guys have kind of been craving, and they were trying to do with Tekken, but they couldn't. So basically, Bandai Namco pushing these guys out kind of was a blessing in disguise because Bandai Namco are so greedy, they're so predatory. I made videos in the past talking about how bad of a corporation they are. They're shooting themselves in the foot, basically. These guys pushed out their employees, and honestly, making a fighting game is very difficult to do, and it's not something that could just be done willy-nilly. It's not an FPS, right? Tekken is so complex. They're pushing out the people who know how to make the game and who are good at it, who understand it, who built the engine, who built this, who built that, who did this, and those guys are now free. At first, it might have felt like a curse, a burden. You know, Harada wandering the world probably was really difficult, but now that they have security in their studio, they have long-term funding, long-term development, it's a blessing. And when you see the way that these guys are talking about it, they're relieved. They're talking about how like the culture here is great. It feels like the 90s again. You know, when old people start talking about the 90s, they're having a lot of fun. And that's good because that means the product that they make will probably be a lot of fun as well. I am very interested to see what these guys end up creating because I know Harada also said that they're still kind of stocking the staff, right? They're still kind of building up forces. One thing I do want to talk about is who will join next. Michael Murray has been very silent. Yasuda Esports has been very silent, but I'm certain those guys don't have no loyalty to Bandai Namco. Bandai Namco treats their employees like trash, bro. So why on earth would they stay there? Why on earth would they not also go join Harada? There was one theory out there that Bandai Namco, and this is just how corporations work, period. They won't let everyone leave all at once because who's going to continue to do, you know, the seasons and what the players paid for and who's going to continue to operate. So usually in a situation when everyone wants to leave, they'll tell people to leave at a certain amount of time. What we saw with Nakatsu and Harada, I believe it was about 6 months apart. Now we have this announcement here from Yasuda that's a little bit months after that. So who knows? Maybe 6 months from Yasuda or Nakatsu leaving, then maybe Michael Murray will leave, and then maybe 6 months from that, Yasuda would leave. That's just a prediction. Don't quote me on that. I'm just saying that like that's how corporations do it when everyone want to leave. They stagger it. But another point I was going to make is kind of going back to the whole idea of the new game that they're making. Harada said that it's going to be 3 years until we get a look at anything. They're still trying to build up the staff, and they're not. He even said at one point in time that they don't even have that much like confidential information to leak. Right? They're still building up the leaders. They're still building up the visionaries, and then they could get to the next phases. So honestly, this is very exciting. Fighting games seem to be kind of like in a washy spot right now. Some of them are flopping. Some of them are having poor launches, but Harada having all the resources, having all the time, he can look at everything that's happening, and with his multiple years of experience, he could build a fantastic team, and he can also learn from all the mistakes he made and everyone's making, and just understand how to make a fighting game in the year 2026 right now. But about time, 3 years later, it's going to be 2029, and then about time his game hit the shelves, it's going to be like 2031 ish. That's a lot of time to plan, to prepare, and we're looking at the early formation of it. This is a big announcement, and I just want to make a video about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and bye bye.